Hello, everybody. Sorry, I was not tweeting there, I promise you. How are we? Yeah, welcome to Redmen TV. My name's Dan Club. I'm back once again with the Renegade Master. Talk to you about Liverpool news. And of course, we've gone a little bit earlier than originally planned, a little bit earlier than first scheduled, because Liverpool, it was an imminent announcement. Now it's very much a happened announcement. Liverpool have confirmed Richard Hughes will take over the post of sporting director at the end of the current season. Obviously, as we know, he's currently employed by Bournemouth. He's seeing out the rest of the season there. He is basically completing the handover to Simon Francis, who will take over the reins down on the south coast. And Liverpool, of course, currently have no sporting director. That will change in the very, very soon future. So let's get into it. How are we all? Hope we are well. I'll dive into the chat before I do anything else. Cody, hi. Hope you are well. Likewise, Plu, Mr. MH, Clan Dub, I like that. Afternoon, Dan. Afternoon, mate. Hope you are well, Steve. Nice to see you in the chat. Mr. Ritter, likewise. Dave Vaughan, great news. Feeling a lot calmer about KLOPP leaving by the day. And I think that's an important part of this. I'll dive into what it means in a minute. I want to get through the actual statement itself first, but I'll make you absolutely spot on. Nelson, hope you're well. Cody, also happy with the news. Sound. Let me clear that, and then I'll get into the statement. Liverpool, of course, have released a statement upon confirming Richard Hughes will take over. Liverpool FC can confirm the appointment of Richard Hughes as the club's new sport director, a post he will take up at the end of the 2023-24 season. The 44-year-old will join the Reds after leaving his role as technical director at AFC Bournemouth, where he enjoyed a decade of successful stewardship on the South Coast club's football operation. Hughes will officially take over responsibility at the AXA Training Centre on June the 1st in advance of the 24-25 campaign, having been appointed by Michael Edwards, who was recently named Fenway Sports Group's CEO of football. The pair had previously worked together during Hughes' playing career at Portsmouth. I'm not going to read absolutely every single word of this because, let's be honest, that's ridiculous. It says they played over 300 times. He played for Portsmouth and Bournemouth against us. He's actually knocked us out the FA Cup one time at Fratton Park as well. So he knows Liverpool. He knows what it's all about. And he has been our downfall before. Hopefully not on this occasion. Hopefully he can be very much our upwards fall, which definitely isn't a thing. And Michael Edwards, Hughes has spoken first and foremost, commented on his new position with Liverpool. Hughes said, "I'm incredibly proud to be offered this opportunity. Liverpool FC is a unique club and I'm grateful to be given a chance to serve in this capacity. People rightly talk about the rich history this organisation can boast, but it's its present and future which really excites me. Jurgen Klopp is leading an outstanding team and squad. Alongside that commitment of young players, and their pathway to the first team is also outstanding." Yeah, we've seen that in recent times, haven't we? I am fully aware of the expectations and responsibilities that come with taking this position. It will be my job working with Michael Edwards and leading the football operations team already in place, plus the wider staff at the AXA Training Centre to make good decisions. That's really what the job entails. You have to make the kind of good decision which enhance the prospects of having a team that wins and excites the supporters. It is what Liverpool have done well for a very long time, and the benefits are there for everyone to see. And it goes on to say, the appointment of Hughes is the first significant decision made by Edwards since assuming the newly created position of FSG CEO of football. Restructuring the club's leadership falls under his purview. That's a word you don't see every day, as does oversight of day-to-day on-pitch activity. And Edwards has also commented on it as well. We know Michael Edwards and Richard Hughes do go back some way. And we know there's a pre-existing relationship there, which I think bodes well for Liverpool moving forward. We're just on Michael Edwards and his comments. I'm delighted to have Richard. So I'm delighted Richard's agreed to join us in this vitally important position. I've known him for half my life in a professional and personal capacity, and he is absolutely someone who embodies the best values of Liverpool FC. I trust him completely. His outstanding judgment and a track record of making smart decisions which benefit the organisations he represents. Both Richard and I are aware of the weight of responsibility that comes with working in his capacity for a club such as this. The fact he is excited and energised by the challenge ahead is important. It is clear to everyone that Jurgen will leave a legacy to build upon, and in Richard we have the right person to make the key decisions and offer the leadership to take us forward into a bright future. As one very successful chapter will come to a close at Liverpool in the summer, the objective of everyone here is for another one to begin. And with Richard, I am confident we have the right person in position for us to achieve this aim. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I got there eventually. That is a lot of words to say, having never read them before. Listen, come back to it. I'm delighted. Ashley Frith, good morning. Sir Scotty, good morning. Like, this is the new dawn of Liverpool now. Like, I sat here yesterday and said the reappointment of Michael Edwards into albeit a brand new position was a real positive for me. I think getting somebody back in the building, back in situ, who FSG clearly trust, and we know to have a very good reputation in this sort of sphere, and we know he knows what he's doing. We know he understands the club. He makes smart decisions more often than not, and this one to me feels like another smart decision. Now, as ever, I've spent a little bit of time doing a bit more research on Richard Hughes and what he's all about and his track record at Bournemouth and all that sort of stuff, and everyone I've spoken to really at Bournemouth they've waxed lyrical about the job he's done, to be honest with you. Not just in terms of like transfer-wise and managerial hire-wise, they are very pleased with the appointment of Iraola, of course, which he was very much at the forefront of. But more importantly, it feels like he's going to leave Bournemouth in a much better place, like a much, much better place than he was, because 10 years ago, I think it's fair to say Bournemouth weren't the football club they are now, and he's managed to not only help and oversee that upwards trajectory, but he's also managed to move with the times as well. Like when they were in the Championship and starting to make their way and make big strides really as a proper football club at the very upper echelons of the English football pyramid, they were buying very different types of players. They were shopping in very different supermarkets, for want of a better expression. But as times evolved and Bournemouth have grown, and again, he's been a key part as to why they have done so. And they've even got new ownership now. They're able to spend a lot more money. It feels like he's moved with that role, and he's been able to adapt his own expertise and his own knowledge and his own skill set to evolve with it, and that's really impressive in itself. And listen, there's no two ways about it. Like the brass tacks of this is that Bournemouth and Liverpool, Bournemouth fans won't mind me saying, are worlds apart in the sort of where they'll be shopping, in the conversations they'll be having, in the type of players we're looking to attract. I'm aware of that, not just financially, but just in terms of the pulling power. In theory, it should be an easier job for Richard Hughes, certainly in the transfer market, but they are going to be different types of people, different agents, etc., that they're speaking to. But again, like Hughes' credentials, Hughes' his backstory, his track record is an impressive one. I mean, he was a footballer, as I alluded to during that. He played against Liverpool in the past, but he started off life in Italy, so he speaks fluent Italian. I think he's got French under his bow. He's a multilingualist, which will definitely help as well when you're having these types of conversations with players and all that sort of stuff. So I'm really pleased. And again, I'll come back to it. As much as I'm not totally, completely well versed on Richard Hughes and the jobs that he's done, I'm much more so than I was a few weeks ago, to be honest. But again, I'll come back to it. The fact that Michael Edwards implicitly trusts him and thinks he's essentially like, this is Michael Edwards' job, like what Richard Hughes is walking into. Edwards did this. Edwards was the best in class at it. He was very much the gold standard. So if he thinks, and it's kind of on his watch as well, like this appointment is Edwards' first one as referenced in the article, the statement there. So he's got to start getting his decisions right immediately, because otherwise questions might get asked of him. So if he thinks Richard Hughes is the right man for what was formerly his job, and he knows how that job should be done right and should be done well, that kind of should be enough for us. Like, I've seen a lot of conversations. Somebody a moment ago mentioned it in the chat about his track record from a transfer perspective, which I know is so integral to the sporting director role. Of course it is. And people can unpick certain hits and misses, let's put it that way, from what he's done at Bournemouth. But again, I think if Edwards thinks he can do the job, we've all just kind of got to get behind that, because I don't think there's many out there that don't trust Michael Edwards. I think that's a fair assessment to make. So anyway, let's dive into the chat, see what we're talking about. MK, love it that Richard also mentioned the pathway for our academy players. Klopp's kids are here to stay. Well, realistically, some of them hopefully. Yeah, absolutely. And that's another important part of it. And, you know, the development of youngsters at Bournemouth has been a part of his job down there. He has done a decent job of that. They've had a couple of sort of breakthrough prospects, I think it's fair to say. I think a lot of what he's done well down at Bournemouth, transfer-wise, manager-wise, of course. The Gary O'Neill sacking was an interest, and that could be viewed upon as a bit of a cross against his name in a way, because a lot of people raised eyebrows at that. But I think when you look at how it's worked out for both parties in that sense, it's probably worked out for the best. So it's not even that much of a downside necessarily. But Bournemouth are building a new training ground right now as we speak, and they're about to move into a new stadium as well. So again, I'll come back to it. He had his fingers across everything at Bournemouth, and that's a football club that has advanced rapidly during the 10 years he's been there. So Feels like he's a smart man. It feels like he knows what he's doing. Sonny Marcus James Smith says, since Bournemouth had their new owners, Richard Hughes' recruitment has helped Bournemouth stay up comfortably in 2 straight seasons. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And again, I think a lot of people will point to the business we did with them, ironically, with Jordan Ibe, Brad Smith and Dom Solanke. I mean, Dom Solanke's turned out to be an absolute hit. There's no two ways about that. I think the Brad Smith one probably didn't work out. They probably did overpay for him, it's fair to say. I mean, we all lauded Michael Edwards for getting above the odds on that particular transfer. So, yeah, I think Jordan Ibe has got different reasons as to why it didn't work out. I'm not going to go into them now, but his football career probably didn't pan out as it should have done, I think it's fair to say, for very unfortunate reasons and sad reasons in a lot of ways as well. So, yeah, again, I come back. I think it's a really, really positive step. And to kind of spin off what I was saying yesterday on one of these shows, like, Liverpool need to get their ducks in a row, and this is just the next part of that. Like this new dawn that I mentioned right at the top, it's happening. Whilst it's so important that the on-pitch stuff stays in control and we stay, headed steadfast towards the Premier League and hopefully Europa League double in the business end of the season with the Carabao Cup tagged on as well, of course. I think it is vitally important that FSG are getting these appointments behind the scenes right and getting them done, because if not, we're going to find ourselves in a very sticky situation come mid-May, whereby we may not have had a sporting director in situ, likewise a manager, who knows. So I think this is a positive, definitely a positive. Let's dive back into this chat. Dave Vaughan says, the thing with getting recruitment right is it allows you to have a manager who isn't as good as Klopp because you're giving him the best possible place to work. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think he references it there, life after Klopp is going to be different, but we need to think positively about it. We need to imagine that things aren't just going to fall off a cliff. Like, we are going to continue to improve. We are going to get better and better. And there's no better foundations from which to do that than the squad and the crop of youngsters that Jurgen Klopp is about to leave behind. Like, whatever happens between now and the end of this current campaign, this group is primed for success, like 100% primed for success. So I think whoever the people are that come in, obviously Edwards, Hughes now, and then the manager, they've got the best possible situation to be working with. I think that's fair to say. MK asks, are you concerned that German journalists, pundits and podcasters are increasingly confident that Xabi will stay at Leverkusen? Now, I did see a little bit of this yesterday. I think it might have been Leverkusen's president himself or the CEO, one of them, talking about that. And I guess he's well within his rights to do so. I mean, whether that means he's had conversations with Xabi Alonso to that effect, and Alonso's giving him his word that, no, I'm sticking around until the end of my contract, I'm not quite sure. Or is it simply the fact that obviously Leverkusen want to keep him, and perhaps more importantly in his eyes, he's under contract there until 2026, so they're not obliged to let him go, far from it. So their stance, and especially when you consider what they're still going for this season, their stance is rightly steadfast, and it's rightly no, Xabi Alonso stays. That could change when it comes down to it, and it all boils down to the crux of the matter at the end of the season, whereby we actually come for Xabi Alonso and Xabi Alonso potentially wants to leave as well. That situation can change in the click of a fingers. Jordan Ibe is playing for FC United. I was aware of that, and I'm glad to see him back playing football. I really am. It's a massive, massive positive. So yeah, let's see. Binary says, last week German press were convinced he was going to Bayern. Yeah, and again, I think the Bayern stuff was very heavily weighted in the Bayern, and maybe with Bayern trying to unrest Leverkusen a little bit as well, which clearly hasn't worked, because Leverkusen have continued on their merry way for all intents and purposes. So yeah, I don't concern myself necessarily with the Alonso stuff right now, because if Bayer Leverkusen were like 10th or 11th in the Bundesliga, they were out of the Pokal and they were out of Europa League, just for argument's sake, we might be having a completely different conversation about Xabi Alonso. We might not want him that much, but let's just say we did still at the same level. There's half a chance that, next month, the end of April, start of May, we could confirm Xabi Alonso as our next manager. But because of what's going on in both our respective calendars, that doesn't feel like it's going to happen. A few people asking who would my next choice be, including someone who called me Clubber, which is, I've been called a lot of things in my time. That is new. Ruben Amorim would probably be my second, and I'm not just saying that because he kind of already is sort of firmly installed as a second favourite to get the job. I think he's the type of manager we should be going for, some young up-and-coming type who will grow and continue to develop this team. And Liverpool have a track record of not signing the finished article in a way. We go for the next big thing in terms of transfers. I think our managerial appointment will be very similar. So I think Amorim ticks those boxes. I think he'd make sense. And I have a real soft spot, it feels like, and I often use this manager as like a bit of a yardstick. And I know his stock has fallen dramatically in the past 12, 18 months, and I know he's far from perfect for what I'm about to say, but I think Julian Nagelsmann might make a little bit of sense as well for what Liverpool are looking for. And he's far from perfect. I said it yesterday, so anyone who's back with me, forgive me. Xabi Alonso's up here, and the others are way, way down here. But I do put Nagelsmann in that others category a little bit. I think he's a very good manager. He's still young. He's still got a bright future ahead of him, it feels like. Again, I'll come back to it. His stock has dramatically fallen from what happened at Bayern Munich. Sound, let's pop into... MK, sorry, I'll come back to it. Yeah, again, I often wonder if there's an ulterior motive in some of this stuff. Quite possibly, they might be absolutely spot on, and we may all be made to look very foolish. But I do wonder whether they're saying it for certain reasons. They've got a dog in the fight, maybe, who knows. And that's the case in this country as well, by the way. Craig Flynn likes Roberto De Zerbi, the last choice. Oh no, you don't like Roberto De Zerbi at all. You think he's the last choice? Okay. Yeah, I'm not in on De Zerbi either, by the way, for what it's worth. Something doesn't sit right with me with him. Somebody there said Alonso or nothing. How about Hansi Flick? I'm not quite sure about Hansi Flick either. Yusuf will be fuming if we end up with De Zerbi. Yeah, I'm not in love with De Zerbi whatsoever. I don't mind the Hansi Flick, and yeah, this as well, JD. I tend to agree. I think Alonso is also a very perfect Michael Edwards type manager, but I think Nagelsmann, again, falls into that category as well. And listen, I get it. And I know it's not perfect. I'm not sitting here advocating for Julian Nagelsmann to be the guy. Quite the opposite of that. I think Alonso remains very much the guy. But yeah, I think if you're getting down the order, if you have to cross a few names off, I don't think I'm too far away before I get to someone like Julian Nagelsmann personally. But again, there's definitely other candidates. And somebody, Mr. Moses, thinks we might actually get Nagelsmann. Craig Flynn, is there a way we can just remove Craig Flynn from ever contributing to one of these shows again? Quite possibly. I'm fully away joking, but my God, I must admit, on that note, just a brief aside to what we're talking about, the United links to Gareth Southgate are utterly incredible. Like, make that happen. I beg. I mean, Erik ten Hag staying, although I know what happened at the weekend, that was papering over cracks for me. It feels like every time United do something good, it's instantly just they papered over cracks. But that's kind of accurate as well. Like, they weren't great at the weekend. We shot ourselves in the foot, and on balance of play, we should have had that game wrapped up. So in a way, every time they do something positive and everyone's okay with Ten Hag again, I'm like, okay, that's fine. But on the flip side of that, if they were to sack Ten Hag and they were to get Gareth Southgate, I am here for that. Nigel Smith, same as what I said about Craig Flynn a minute ago. Can we get rid, please? This as well, and this is one of my first sort of takes on the Xabi Alonso stuff, to be honest. And we've completely got sidetracked here from Richard Hughes. It's like, how fast does the news cycle go, by the way? We've appointed Hughes, that's done. Like, move on, next thing. But I get it. The next piece of the jigsaw is definitely the manager. And Thomas Frank, a shout from Dave Wood. Yeah, don't hate those shouts. I do wonder whether he's a little bit Klopp light, in that he's quite similar in his mannerisms and the way he goes about his business. And I do like him, but I have this inbuilt fear that because he is a little bit Kloppy, I hate that, because he isn't Jurgen Klopp as well, be like, okay, I get what you're trying to do, mate, but you're not Jurgen, so yeah, there's something doesn't quite settle in me about that. And likewise with the Madrid stuff, I was going to mention, because Klopp's era, Marley Klopp, my biggest concern in life right now, after the Klopp era, Klopp leaving is sickening, it's heartbreaking, but I can make peace with the Xabi Alonso succession, because I think he's brilliant and I really like him. There's obviously an affinity there, there's a connection already. He's a wonderful, wonderful footballer, and I think moving forwards, he could be the perfect man for this job. I think it comes a little bit too soon, if I'm being honest, but you're not in an ideal world, because Klopp wasn't supposed to leave now. In an ideal world, Xabi Alonso would have more experience, he'd have another year at Leverkusen, and then they'd swap over, but that doesn't exist. But I just really, really fear that if we don't get Alonso, say we decide not to, for whatever crazy reason that is, he goes on to Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, whoever, and he is the next best manager in the world. Like, imagine missing out on him. Like, how many times have we turn down players or football clubs turn down players. Like people go on trial. Or I remember we had Martin Odegaard on trial for a little bit, and I mean Zlatan Ibrahimovic went on trial at Arsenal, if I'm not mistaken, years and years ago. And for whatever reason, you say, "Oh no, not for us," and then they go on to be what they went on to be. And I don't want that story with Xabi Alonso. I don't want to come back to this stream in like 10 years' time and say, "Yeah, that's happened." That'd be gutting. Absolutely gutting. Henry H, would you go for Emery instead? No. Anyone who watched the podcast recently when we did discuss Unai Emery in length, no. Unai Emery's a brilliant football manager. Don't get me wrong, brilliant football manager. Do I think he's a Liverpool football manager? No, I don't. And putting my finger on, as we discovered in that podcast, as to why is really, really difficult. There's just something not Liverpool about him. And that's not to say he's not excellent at what he does, because he absolutely is. Marley Clark. Alonso will be the best manager in 5 years regardless. Just hope it's for us. Yeah, 100%. Dave Ruddy is a free agent now, Rafa. But no thanks. Adam Smith says Souness. That's a rogue shout. I can see it though. Yeah, listen. Yeah, probably Nagelsmann, Graham Souness, I think. A lot of people still driving the Pep Linders train. Listen, it's not going to happen because he's already confirmed he will leave when Jurgen does. And I think he's actually destined for Ajax, to be honest with you. But yeah, I get why people would back Pep Linders. He's been there, he's been around it. I do. There's also that element of, do you want a fall guy after Klopp? Like, do you want the guy to be the successor? Because we've seen it with Man United and David Moyes. They've had quite a few fall guys since then, if truth be told. But it does feel like somebody has to take a bit of a bullet, and following Klopp and stepping into those shoes is so difficult. It's going to be hard, and maybe you do want someone who you don't necessarily perceive to be the long-term actual future of the football club, just to come in and essentially get sacked in a few months' time. That's a bit harsh on Pep Linders, by the way, but I get the argument, and I also get why Linders would be in contention. We have a super chat from Imran Adam, who says, how many goals is McAllister away from getting him an Ali Maka song like Gary Maka? Is a good question. Listen, I'll be honest with you, I don't even think goals the barometer for which we should measure that. I think that comes down to performances, and my God, like, that lad has been exceptional in recent weeks. Like, I spoke earlier about Richard Hughes having his fingers across everything positive at Bournemouth. I think Alexis McAllister has had his fingers, toes, chest. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Howard Webb. Across everything positive from a Liverpool point of view in recent weeks, he's just been sublime in midfield. Defensively, in the attacking sense, he's been absolute joy to watch. He's come into his own. I think the start of his Liverpool career was good. I don't think it was perfect, but recently, honestly, I can't fault him. He's just been out of this world. Some of his performances have been absolutely incredible. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. What's your opinion on Gerrard as a coach? Listen, Gerrard as a coach, we're 2 years removed from Steven Gerrard and Julian Nagelsmann, ironically, probably being the ideal candidates to replace Jurgen Klopp. But obviously, what's happened has happened since then. Villa time for Gerrard didn't necessarily go to plan. Likewise, he's now out in Saudi Arabia, so it feels like his managerial careers took a detour, let's put it that way. But Gerrard, the man, is an absolute hero of mine. Anyone who was here yesterday will know I named him, unsurprisingly, as my favourite ever Liverpool player. Tim Maslin. Who's Richard Hughes? I don't know his background. A rough guide to his background through a whistle-stop tour of his life, if I can. Played, I think started out life in Italy, definitely. I think at Atalanta, I want to say. That might be incorrect, though. Do forgive me if so. Then he came and played for Arsenal for a little bit as like a youth player. So he speaks fluent Italian, not from his time at Arsenal, from his time in Italy, of course. 300 appearances across his career for Bournemouth and Portsmouth, sort of combined. And then he moved into a technical director role at Bournemouth, where he's been for quite some years. He has a working relationship and a personal relationship with Michael Edwards, which has extended years and years and years, because Michael Edwards was working at Portsmouth whilst Richard Hughes was still a player there, which is where they met. So yeah, I think it works. I think it makes sense. Those two working in tandem feels like a bit of a match made in heaven. Feels like a really smart fit. And I think it's joined up thinking from FSG, not only to get Michael Edwards back, but to allow Michael Edwards to appoint people that he knows are good at what they do, he knows he can trust, and he knows he can work with, essentially, because that's the key to all of this. Like 12 months ago, I was sat here probably talking about Jörg Schmadtke and his appointment, and he wasn't best in class He wasn't the gold standard in what he did. He was good at what he did, but in terms of like industry specialist, he was fine. He had decent expertise, but he wasn't the guy. But the reason he made sense is because he could work with Jurgen Klopp, and there was a relationship there that made sense. So it did. But again, I come back to it. Richard Hughes feels like he's very much at the very top of his game, and he knows Michael Edwards really well, so it's a good fit. And he's been at Bournemouth for 10 years. He's been overseeing everything good about Bournemouth really in that time, because whatever you think about them, prior to that, their trajectory has been upwards. They're now a pretty established Premier League side, I think it's fair to say, on what has been at times a relatively low budget in Premier League terms by comparison. Done some smart transfer business along the way, a couple of misses along the way as well, a couple of free agent exits which were a little bit alarming to me, a couple of red flags, but again, I spoke to a journalist about it. That show will be coming out a little bit later down at Bournemouth as well. I spoke to a Bournemouth podcaster about it last week as well, and kind of the general mood and the general consensus from them both is he's really good at what he does, and Bournemouth are going to miss him, which is kind of all you can ask for from a Liverpool point of view, isn't it? So yeah, positive. Really, really positive. I'll dive into some more news before we go, because I don't want to make this all about Richard Hughes, although clearly he is the headline act amongst all of this. And now, though, I'll dive back into the comments as well. Have to back him. Didn't know Michael Edwards before we knew Michael Edwards. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and again, said right at the top, Michael Edwards getting somebody through the door who he feels like is the right man for the job should be enough evidence for all of us for now. Time will tell whether he's right, and we'll make our own judgment on Richard Hughes as the weeks and months pass once he's in situ. But for now, all we can really is go off Michael Edwards' word, and I think that's fair enough for me. D. Pearce says Hughes' best signings were Ake, Solanke, Wilson, Ramsdale, Danjuma, Senesi, Alex Scott. I think there's a couple more. Sorry, Henry, ask it again. I do that sometimes and get sidetracked. I genuinely can only apologise. It is definitely not intentional. Do pop it back in, and I'll try and see it if possible. Again, back on transfers for Richard Hughes. There have been some misses along the way. I think a couple of their players now. I think Semenyo would fall into the category of hits when it comes to Bournemouth and comes to Richard Hughes. It's interesting how a lot of the early transfer work done by Richard Hughes, obviously with championship level, some of it with Eddie Howe at the club, and a lot of that was attributed to Eddie Howe as opposed to Richard Hughes. I think they worked together. There was a combined effort, most definitely. But Richard Hughes has always been big on working relationships as well. He's had that with Eddie Howe. He knew Gary O'Neill as well when he got appointed. So the fact that he's coming to join somebody he knows and he's worked with previously in Michael Edwards also feels like a very good, smart fit. So how many goals? Yeah. Sorry, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying now. Yeah, true. Your Derby goal. Oh, you want the actual... I thought you just wanted the McAllister song. But you want the actual same song replicated, but for Alexis McAllister. So it would be your Fulham goal. It would be your Sparta goal. I think the goals need to be of a certain magnitude to warrant that, potentially, is what I'd say. But yeah, he deserves a song. But if you want the actual same song, but change words to suit Alexis McAllister, he's probably 2 or 3 big goals away from that happening, I'd say. Because, yeah, your Derby goal, your Barca, they have to really have some sort of weight behind them. That won't be happening. That's less likely to happen than Graham Souness take over from Jurgen Klopp at the end of the season, which is saying something. Palou, I agree with you on that comment about Jordan I, by the way. Yeah, 100%. I don't want to, again, I'm not going to dwell on that or touch on it too much because it's not the place for it, nor the time, essentially. But yeah, 100% right. Thomas Ray, I have no idea what's happening with Julian Ward. He feels to like just have gone quiet. There have been some links to some certain clubs to him in recent times, but nothing major. I am slightly surprised by that. I thought he'd be back in a role somewhere, to be honest. But yeah, relatively surprising. Okay, sound. Sorry again. Again, it's not. It's never on purpose. Sounds. Deep Ears. The huge standout for me is a very British feel to his early successes in the market and more recently. Yeah, and that is. I don't know if you were with us right at the start, but I'll kind of touch on it again. That is kind of the way Bournemouth have gone. And listen, he may well have been the one to instigate that change. He could have sat there and said, we need to start shopping abroad a little bit more. But that kind of happened in the way Bournemouth have advanced and they've evolved, and their scouting network, their recruitment network has got broader and wider. And Hughes, like I say, has been at the forefront of that. He's been the lead guy in that as well. So he's have to improve his own expertise, his own levels as they've gone on. And this is going to be another example of that, because it's a huge step up from Bournemouth to Liverpool, of course it is, but it does feel like every single time he's had to bend and flex and evolve and to improve what he's doing, he's been able to do so. So there's a really good point, and you are absolutely spot on. It's one of the things that quite a few people have told me about Richard Hughes at early doors in the Championship, and when he was working closely with Eddie Howe, it was a very British-led recruitment policy for all intents and purposes, because they were trying to get out the Championship and then establish themselves in the Premier League. And as they've moved away from that, they've got more money and they are a Premier League club now. You need to broaden your horizons, and Richard Hughes has been able to do so. John Sommers asked, "Hi Dan, how do you rate Dom first season? He started brightly and now not in form. Do you think injuries have definitely disrupted the season? I think he had a little dip in form, and he could have got back to it, but injuries have made that not be the case, unfortunately. But listen, he's a brilliant footballer, and I've no doubt he'll come good again. Even he has said recently he hasn't quite been at it of late, and he also said he's seen nothing yet, so that's exciting. I'm sound, Darren. Hope you are well. I spoke with Neil about this stuff yesterday. He wants an attacker as well. I'd be all in on a centre back, to be honest, but let's just see. Henry H asked, when do you think we'll hear more about FSG's expanding portfolio, potentially by another club, and how do you feel about this? Yeah, the multi-club stuff. Listen, I'm going to do a little bit more on the multi-club over the coming weeks. But yeah, it's interesting. I think there's certain ways in which I hate it and there's certain ways in which I'm okay with it. I think there are certain ways it will benefit Liverpool as well. There's obviously the Red Bull model, there's the City Group model. There's simply having another football club that acts as a little bit of a feeder. Maybe you can, if it's in Portugal, for example, you can get players from South America, allow them to become more acclimatised to Europe, and then we'll take them. That might make sense. He was under Brendan Rodgers. I mean, I seen you ask that twice. That's why I quickly cut myself off because I didn't want to miss it this time. He was under Brendan Rodgers. There's some training pictures of him on Google if you want to check them out. That is a thing that happened. Should have signed him, shouldn't we? Yeah, Hughes is first signing Musiala, hopefully. City Group model, phone money, everyone, yeah, pretty much. Just come back to the multi-club stuff. I've seen Liverpool, FSG rather, are being linked with Pedro Marquez as well from Benfica, who runs their academy, one of the best academies around, to be honest. So that is with an eye to the multi-club stuff as well, which is interesting because that does suggest that whoever the extra club is will have a very youthful feel about it, which again is a nod towards they might act as a bit of an offshore academy for Liverpool, for want of a better expression. It's not something I've ever said out loud before, but it does feel like that could well be the case. Tim asks about Joel Quansah. I don't think he'll take anyone's position next season, but what I will say on Quansah is absolutely nailed down as a first team of Liverpool Football Club. I've got no doubt in my mind whatsoever. As long as Danz and Bajcetic are in the squad after the break, I think they will be. Bajcetic, it's all going to be fitness related, of course, but I think both of them will be in the round, to be honest with you. Thomas Ray said we should look at the left back. Mr. J Mango, how are you, mate? I completely agree with that, by the way. How do you think it benefits a newly acquired club? I get just the expertise really. And again, I'm going to do a couple of big shows on this over the next few days, and people who are far better placed to speak about these sort of things than I am. So I will sort of keep your powder dry for now, but at some point I will be speaking about it because it's really interesting. And I think, again, there's certain ways I don't like it at all, and I wish Liverpool were never getting involved in it, but there are a couple of less painful ways I could see it might actually benefit us in the long run, and ultimately I just want us to be benefited. Juan Alaviso, first step to getting Xabi is Hughes. Okay, they have the same. No, Iraola and Xabi Alonso have the same agent, and obviously Richard Hughes very much hired Iraola at Bournemouth, so there is a little link there as well. So, yeah, not me getting excited, I promise. Okay, sound. I'm just going to dive into the actual news. Yes, that I've just mentioned, sorry. I'm 99.9% certain that Iraola and Alonso share the same agent, and therefore that is a pre-established relationship, and that could work. And hopefully, listen, I said it a couple of weeks ago now, I think. Michael Edwards in, Richard Hughes in, Xabi Alonso in, those three, perfect. In terms of the new dawn, in terms of getting things sorted behind the scenes, perfect. Absolutely perfect. Couple that with how good we are and just the exciting players we've got and the academy stuff that I've already mentioned. Dreamland. Absolute dreamland. So I will just pop into the actual news before I go, because I had about 15 things I wanted to talk to you about. Not that many, but a few things. The penalty stuff. My God. I'm not going to spend too long on this. It was, Howard Webb spent some time last night trying to justify and tell Michael Owen why the Jeremy Doku studs in the chest of Lexi McAllister wasn't a penalty. He used some words like, he basically said, what did he say? You're not alone. It split a lot of opinion. I think one of those for sure, if the referee gives it on the field, it would have been check complete by VAR. We know there's contact on McAllister. McAllister comes into him. McAllister is not really playing the ball either, so I understand why it's split opinion. It would have been check complete either way, not wanting to re-referee the game in situations that are not really clear, which we think VAR is in for this situation. Doesn't it make sense, Howard? The VAR stayed out of it. I think that is what we would expect. No, what we'd expect, Howard, is to get the decision right. That's, you know what? It's going to sound mad, this. That's literally all you guys are employed for, to get the decision right. Crazy, I know. What a mad concept. And the VAR audio actually annoyed me more than what Howard Webb said, which is saying something. And you know me, anyone who's seen me on these things, I can be a little bit, not blasé, but I'm a little bit immune to bad refereeing now, because they're so bad. Like, it annoys you and it winds you up at the time, but then a day later it's like, yeah, the crap. I know the crap. This isn't fresh news to me, so I can just brush it off, because otherwise I'm going to spend my whole life getting worked up about refereeing decisions, which, I spent a lot of my life getting worked up about refereeing decisions. I can't do it much more. But the VAR audio was just bizarre. Baffling. The decision not to award the penalty was bizarre. And I went on BBC Radio Merseyside last week with Julia Bold, and Keith Hackett came on. And Keith Hackett the air was blue, let's put it that way. He was livid. And I don't think he's got sort of any affiliation with Liverpool, but my God, he was fuming with the decision not to award that penalty. Like, it's just not fit for purpose, is it? The referees aren't fit for purpose. It's not a VAR problem necessarily. It's an officials problem. They're not good at what they do. It's as simple as that, and it's crazy. But the VAR on this one said McAllister comes into his space, which again, I don't know what that means. McAllister's allowed to move. He's playing football at a very high speed. Moving is kind of part of what happens. What's going on there? Clear contact on the ball. Was it clear? Was it really clear? Because I'm not sure it was clear. And the absolute cherry on top of this particular cake was they were both coming high. I mean, despite all the innuendos that are involved in that, like, only 1 foot left the ground, lads. Like, literally, McAllister went with his chest, and you could see he panics. He's thinking, I'm about to get studs at some point, possibly in my face, certainly in my body. Like, so he's definitely turned his body in a little bit like, I don't fancy this much, and who could blame him? But only one of them comes high, and it's not Alexis McAllister. Like, I don't know what they're looking at. And somebody a moment ago in the chat had just caught my eye, said, the assistant VAR said, let me have a look at that. And the VAR basically said, you don't worry about it. You carry on having your drink, mate. I've got this. But it was interesting how the assistant VAR, it felt like for a split second, and I've watched it back 2 or 3 times, it felt like he was almost insinuating that, I'm not sure about this. Like, you might have made a mistake here. But he was kind of just brushed off as being like, oh, no, I'm the guy. You're my assistant. Like, and that hierarchy stuff stinks. And I even thought that at the time of Michael Oliver, because he's, regarded or certainly spoken of as one of the best in the business in terms of referees, which is not saying a lot, let's be honest about it. But it's almost as you don't want to tell him to go and have a look at the monitor or question his decisions because he is good. There does feel like there's some sort of hierarchy, and on Howard Webb, it's all just you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, protect your mate's club. It stinks. Honestly, it stinks. And unfortunately, Premier League clubs up and down the land have been sawn off by bad decisions time and time again this season. No two ways about it. But it does feel like, and obviously I'm very Liverpool biased and very much of a Liverpool persuasion, but it does feel like we are getting royally stitched up in big games as well. That's the problem. Spurs away, Arsenal at home, now Man City home as well. And people will point to a drop ball against Nottingham Forest and then a goal that happened 2 minutes later. I'm sorry, but they're just not comparable. Like, I'm sorry. It's nonsense. It's utter nonsense. The refs are terrible. They are. And again, I can have a conversation with any fan of any football club because they're crap, and everyone knows they're crap. The standards of officiating are in the mud, and how we fix it is a different question altogether, but they're certainly not fit for purpose now. One of my biggest ways of fixing it for years and years has been buying the best officials from across the world, because they do it with the best players. Why not do it with the best referees? Because there seems to be no other solution at this point, because honest to God, it's terrible. Thomas Ray, Oliver hates being questioned. You can tell. You can tell. It doesn't surprise me if that was the case at all. And I don't want to, question the integrity of anyone. It's not what I'm here for. But ultimately, when decisions this bad go wrong time and time again, it does leave you, and I said this on the radio actually, it does leave you questioning, how has this happened? Because one of the ways I thought they might have got it wrong or avoided making a controversial decision was because it was so late in the game and the magnitude of the game was so great, and they were potentially deciding the Premier League title, not just a game of football. Maybe they panicked and thought, I don't want to be the one getting involved in that. And that's kind of one of the only ways you can explain it, because you look at all the things that it needs to be a penalty, and it ticks every single box. The only one it doesn't tick is, does this decide a Premier League title? And then they go, yeah. And you go, oh, I'm not touching that then. Anyway, I said I wasn't going to get annoyed about it, and here I am, 5 minutes later, still ranting on. The Richard Hughes is done, penalty stuff. So I was going to ask you a trivia question today, because I've done these news shows 3 days on the run, so I want to mix it up a little bit. So before I go, I'm going to go in 2 minutes, I promise. Can you name the two players? It's obviously on topic, it's on brand. Name the two players who play for Liverpool, Bournemouth and Portsmouth. Go. And you will know them, and you will have heard of them. The problem is, if you're born like the last 20 years, you might be struggling with one of them, but you'll know them both, I imagine. Lunch has already been had. They had it before coming on. It was pasta, really getting the important topics out of the way there. Two players who play for Liverpool, Bournemouth and Portsmouth. Answer that before I go. And I'll quickly give you my last story, which was about Johan Bakayoko. Fabrizio Romano spoke about Johan Bakayoko. He said he's been aware there's been some stories about Liverpool targeting the talented young PSV winger Johan Bakayoko, but there was nothing concrete yet, nothing serious, with the Belgium international 100% focused on PSV. It's true that many clubs have been monitoring Bakayoko since last summer. Scouts from English clubs are always travelling to follow him, but it's nothing more concrete than that for now. At the end of the season, we will likely see Bakayoko assessing his options. I've seen some people with some answers in the chat, and this one isn't one of the correct ones. It's not a bad shout, to be fair. Definitely Portsmouth and Liverpool, but he played for West Ham as well, and Chelsea, obviously, but not Bournemouth. Not Martin Kelly either. Thank you very much. Okay. Thanks, nice. Correct. That's one of them. There's one more, and that's the more obvious one. There's a niche one than that. No, definitely Crouch, sorry. No, Jonesy. He also played for Portsmouth and Liverpool, but not Bournemouth. That might be one, Dom. That is not the one I've got in my mind. So if you're right and I'm wrong, forgive me. I literally looked this up for 5 minutes this morning. So yeah, you could be right. There might be three, but there's definitely another one that we're missing. 100%. It is Peter Crouch or Craig Flynn, yeah, spot on. Oh, years ago. I'll give you a clue on the last one, actually, before I go. He's a defender, first and foremost. That wasn't the clue I was going to give you. He's playing on the weekend in the Legends game, this guy. And he often does. And he also spends some time at Rangers. I can't give you any more clues than that. I'm going to find out his Liverpool years now whilst I'm talking. From the year 2000 to the year 2005, he only made 11 league appearances, though. So I don't blame you if that isn't exactly, banging down the door as to who it is. But yeah, so it's not Glenn Johnson, no. I will go. Just to quickly recap all the news, and I will tell you who the guy is before. And I hope the website was right that he got it off this morning. If not, and we'll look very, very silly, which is fine. Apparently he did. Anyway, news. Richard Hughes appointed, confirmed as Liverpool sporting director at the end of the season. Xabi Alonso is also the front runner still for Liverpool job. The penalty thing with Howard Webb was just shambolic, wasn't it? Absolutely shambolic. Like, what on earth was happening there? Johan Bakayoko, nothing concrete moving on him. Scouts keep going to watch him from all over the world. But yeah, that's the news. I'm going to quickly check. Thank you very much for getting involved in the chat as ever. I'm going to quickly check something. 1 second. Liam Scales. That's not the right scales. Sorry, I'm just talking now. I'm going to go because I'm way over time, way over time, and I apologise. Everyone's saying Crouch, but then people are saying it's not Crouch. I'm not going to check it because I can't. I've got to go. I'll speak to you all very, very soon. Take it easy.
Thank you so very, very much for checking out the video. If you enjoyed it, drop a like. The season is now well underway. If you need extra Redmen content, be it podcast, videos, documentaries, interviews, and general shows, fill your boots on redmenplus.com today.